we're here. We're only a few minutes late. I know you guys were really regretting the fact that we didn't start on time, but we are here for another Flashpoint Q&A. We are inching closer, very slowly, to Flashpoint 2, which is still probably happening in November. We should have an announcement next week, I think, about that. And actually location, official dates, everything like that. Maui's super hyped to come work on Flashpoint 2, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I want to see London from the inside of the bubble.
Oh, you just spoiled it.
Peering outside, just waving at strangers through the windows.
Thank you, Maui, for spoiling that. Well, probably gonna be doing it in London, guys, as it turns out.
Oh shit! I thought this was public already.
I think we did maybe imply like it might be somewhere like that anyway.
Oh my god! I thought it was public. Oh no.
Good times, good times. Well,
I think
okay.
we hinted at it, so don't worry about it.
It's not a big deal.
It's not technically official just because you said it, so...
I don't know anything. I don't know any... Don't worry
about it.
Oh wait, that's another tournament guy. Sorry. Okay, yeah.
Yes, so trying to set up everything in the bubble so that we get, of course, the proper health and safety to make sure that everything goes forward in an appropriate way. So good stuff. Good stuff. Just leaking it all over the place here on our own stream. Good times. If you guys do have questions about that, so qualifiers for Flashpoint 2, separate regional qualifiers to decide the last 4 teams. We should be announcing that soon. We are probably going to be having some direct invites go out to teams, so I think we'll probably only qualify 2 teams as it stands right now. We will not be having LAN qualifiers for obvious reasons because of the pandemic, so that's not going to be possible. We may not be able to do qualifiers in non-European regions as well. Obviously, that becomes very difficult due to quarantine restrictions and everything like that. We are still working through all of that, but I imagine that this will be part of our announcement next week about our qualifier dates that we have been working on.
Yeah, if people aren't aware, by the way, we aren't obliged to run qualifiers for anyone. Like, we could just literally just invite only Flashpoint teams or Flashpoint plus whoever else. Like, to me, the reason we actually do qualifiers is because, one, we don't have 12 amazing teams, so you might get some that come through the qualification. And also, personally, I do think, in general, you should always leave some kind of a qualification slot open, just because it allows, like, especially in what, to me, I consider still, like, the early days of esports. Sometimes you get a team like HAVU, who you would never invite, but actually they end up being way better at the LAN than you expect. So we already wanted a possibility. But I'm just saying that because people don't realize there might be future Flashpoints that have no qualification. Who knows? Like, I won't drop any gems like Mauisnake here, although I'd be doing it knowingly. But put it this way, what you'll see soon, one of the reasons why it's not pure open qualification slots, except for the partner teams, is because some of the teams that we're going to be having are actually legit. So just wait and see. We'll have the announcement coming soon.
Yeah. So needless to say, we anticipate that the level of competition will be much better, partially due to our partner teams.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, you meant the other thing.
Our partner teams improving. And
yeah, well, technically, they have done the first step in improving MIBR. Now they just have to bring in some good players. You know,
I really was hoping for the return of Orglis, but I guess that's not. That doesn't look like it's a possibility.
Maybe we could just put 2 and 2 together, Mauisnake. Maybe we could invite the MIBR players to play as Orglis in this season.
That would be quite the
just admit.
Yeah.
That is a fucking 7 million IQ move.
Orglis IBR.
I actually think it would be super funny if any team without an organization we just called Orglis from now on, even if they have their own name that they've selected.
Carry on the torch.
We just carry on the torch, and we use that logo that we made for them.
It was a good logo, so I mean, everyone should just be happy to use it.
That's right. The
technically could still happen again. Remember, I won't reveal which region, but the region we're going to run qualifiers from. There's enough talent in that region. There could be a world where some mixed team of pros or people who are inactive at the moment somehow wins the qualifier. It's not impossible.
Indeed, it is definitely still possible. So will next week's announcement also include the teams invited? Yes.
No idea on that.
It'll depend on when we officially get all the documents done with them, but we will announce that relatively, when we have everything, all our ducks in a row. We don't want to, kind of.
Well, this is another thing, if people don't know, this is another thing that's a knock on from all the fallout of the major not taking place, which is when the major didn't take place and then the other TOs changed what they were doing in the calendar, it meant that we all then had to check if we could even make approaches to some of the teams who wanted to potentially use as invites, because obviously if they're playing a tournament that now schedule locks them, they won't be in. So unfortunately, that's why all this stuff, it seems like we've done it because we've done obviously a weekly episode. It seems like we're just saying it every week, like comment soon, information, but like that's because these are like moving pieces that we ourselves could not have nailed down until now. So
yeah, also
just unfortunately the nature of the way the end of the year has gone.
Yeah, it turns out that planning during the pandemic is also incredibly difficult and takes longer and has to be more thoughtful than anticipated. Is HAVU in closed qualifier? We have said previously that we will be, having preferential qualification for teams that have, qualified or done well in Flashpoint in the past. So I expect more information on that, but certainly we would like to reward teams who have previously done well in qualification. So let's see if we have some other questions right now. Maui, what do you think of the current contact roster? There's a question for you that's actually gameplay
contact roster
related.
They're not doing that well. I thought they were gonna probably qualify for the upcoming DreamHack fall, but then they lost to Aves, which is like the third best Polish team, and then they lost. Then they had to face Mausports, and they lost to them. So I think there's potential. I mean, everyone says potential all the time, but I guess this team is right now not where you would want them to be. Is the answer, the real answer to that? I think that Smooya is a great pickup. You don't really have to change too much. I guess Otto needs to not op as much if Smooya is going to be opping, but I just still don't really know what to make of the Spinks guy. I've seen a little bit of him, and I can't really tell if they're just kind of picking him because he's that like decent role player slot in guy and just do what they want him to do, or he's actually taking up a role that he wanted to play on the team. So it's hard for me to read if this is the perfect match for them yet.
I think it's a team that has a lot of skill in it. Like it's certainly like the problem is it's actually a little bit similar to what Contact had before. We've got like a bevy of young players where one or two eventually is going to be good. It's just, are they going to be good now, and which one of them won't make it? Because that's the part that no one bothers figuring out. Is when you have the teams that have potential, like Maui's talking about, that means they also have potential for it not to happen. That's the part that people never stop about. So one of the things I've always learned is, you're looking for, like, this is the guy I'm going to pick. He's going to be my next great player. Like, in this team, it's probably Esperanto. It just looks like from the times he's had his flare-ups on LAN, he looked legit. What you also need to do, though, when you evaluate young talent is, you've got to sometimes be harsh and figure out, like, who are the ones I'm sort of going to put the label on of won't make it? Who's going to be the boss? Like, so, for example, in the last Contact lineup, it was Ships. The guy did absolutely fuck all in Contact. Before that, he was looking like a banger. Like, if people don't know, when he was back in his native country, he looked like all those other great players that have come out of there, Cirque, Poison. He looked super, super sick. So, to me, it's like, they've got some pieces that are very good. I also think Snappy's a decent enough IGL, so I have some faith that can change it. The problem they have is, though, these are completely disparate parts that they're bringing together, and they haven't had any lands to like get people bedded in. Because another thing I think is really tough is trying to be like a brand new team in the online period. It must be so bizarre. Because like part of going to lands is the first few, you just get your shit together, you get to know your teammates, you get to like have a meaningful failure that you have to address. When it's a million online games, I'm sure it's very easy to just be like, oh, who cares about this qualifier, or we'll be the next one then. So I think to me, it's more just like they've got a great set of pieces, but someone's going to have the cohesive vision. But I think they're in a way better position than they were for Flashpoint 1, though, because the problem is the players they had in the lineup that were the bad players, the old holdovers, they had no business being in that team at that point in time.
I kind of want to liken Smooya actually to daps, and that might feel like the most like the antithesis of each other, but in actuality, what Smooya and daps both do is that they raise your team's floor to a very high level that you know that Smooya is going to be outputting and just fragging people nonstop. But the thing is that I haven't really seen him slot into like a really solid system. I think on Big was the closest that he did, but Chaos looked okay, but at the same time, you kind of know that you can't always reel Smooya in as much as maybe you would want to with other players. So, like, you're kind of living by Smooya and you're dying by Smooya in a way that I don't think a lot of teams wanted to take that risk on him. So it's kind of like you hit a ceiling. It's like daps in that you know that you're going to perform at a decent level. You know that you're going to have, whereas daps brings structure, Smoothie brings like a baseline level of firepower
Fragging.
that he will always output out. Yeah, he'll always frag. So you know you're always going to actually have a chance on the server on that level, but it's when it gets nitty gritty, when like the rounds slow down. Is he going to be making the right decision, or is he just going to take a peek because he just feels like he needs some info that maybe another AWPer wouldn't?
Put it this way, that is the one area I do have an initial concern with that lineup, is that I think it was when Neil M was on this podcast, he even said that essentially, he didn't say this part explicitly, but he said that Smoothie would be like the secondary AWP and would AWP when he could, because obviously in their team, that Otto guy is like the primary AWP.
Yeah.
It seems like one of those players who just uses the weapon 24/7. The problem I have with that is, I think Smoothie is a better AWPer than him. So in my opinion, that's like one of those ones where it's like, obviously the guy who's coming in, remember, he's technically on trial right now. You're probably not going to take that guy and go, right, oh, hey, established guy from the team, you lose your main role, and the guy on trial has it. Like, unfortunately, that's just the nature of like the way the game works. Like, people are going to be more fit, like preferential treatment to the established player. But in my opinion, that's something where, like, I know content, I'm going to hear this, but you just wait 3 months, and then in 3 months, if what I have said comes to pass, you just fucking replace that guy as the AWPer, don't you? That's just the nature of the business. I don't know why people pretend, like at the very end of your career, when you're at tier 1, now you have to have like loyalty and friendships. Like if there was any loyalty or friendship, we'd have never heard of any of these players, because they'd all be stuck playing with their shit friends and cousins like 5 years ago when they were semi-pro. The only reason you've heard of them is they all at some point did a ruthless move and took the better career path. So I don't know why people stop right when they're about to make it to the top. They're like, you know what, actually, World Championship, I'm just going to chill with my boys. It's like, well, you can chill in the green room while you're watching the other guy win the championship.
Maybe it's like the Grinch, where their heart just grows 3 times that day, and they receive a conscience at a certain point in time, right? Who can tell when that point is going to be?
It's more like when they hit a salary that's like just 4 figures monthly or something like that. Then they're like, oh, we're going to value, or 5, just like low 5 figures out monthly. And then they're like, that's it. These are my boys now. I got to stick it out with them.
Yeah, it really stopped the Grinch from, stealing everything in Whoville, though. And so, the economic gain and the career gain that the Grinch could have had, he got the emotional fulfillment, but maybe not the best career decision for the Grinch.
Yeah, he made a really bad fiscal career pivot. Just, yeah.
What the Grinch should have done, actually, was just embrace Christmas and become the new Santa Claus, because in doing so, he would have trapped the people of Whoville into a cynical consumerist society, which would have destroyed their families, all the connections, as they all just poured over mammon and all the fucking materialism of the world, forgot everything that made that community beautiful, everything he'd been fighting against. He didn't need to. It was actually the inertia of him actually battling it that allowed that to happen. So if he'd have just gotten out of the way and actually embraced Santa Claus and embraced that pagan ritual of Saturnalia, then essentially he would have destroyed everything that mattered to the people of Whoville.
Yeah, I have to assume they were pretty socialist.
Listen, all I'm saying is my sequel is straight fire, man. my Grinch 2, it's fucking amazing. I'm telling you.
You could throw in some Marxist references and stuff there. Yeah.
All right. Well, moving away from potentially Marxist versus capitalist interpretations of the Grinch, which is definitely where I thought we were going with this podcast, there have been a variety of rumors that people are asking about. Without addressing if they are true or not, we are not validating them here. Let us discuss the rumor of Floppy staying on Cloud9. So speaking of this very topic about maybe selling your bros down the river in order to potentially be on a better roster. This comes at a very good time in this conversation, because it was originally reported that the current / ex-Cloud9 roster wanted to stay together, and now there are rumors that Floppy is in fact joining the new Cloud9 roster, the Henry G era Cloud9 roster. Thoughts on this?
Per the rumor, I would be happy for Floppy if he rejoins, because he's now recognizing that him and OC, when they said earlier that they were going to stick with the ATK, the South African kind of roster, that there's a ceiling for that team. That, I mean, yeah, they'll slowly, incrementally improve, but now what you get when you join a new roster is, one, you have probably better teammates overall, a higher ceiling with it. 2, you get another honeymoon period, because that's actually so important for so many of these players, just playing with fresh faces. Everyone's on their best behavior. Everybody is just kind of like giving everybody so much slack. It's like, oh man, well, Alex was a little mean to me there, but I know he means well. But like later down the line, when you're playing with those with Alex, if he says something that's a little bit more hostile, Floppy won't be as forgiving in that sense. But I mean, the thing is that this team has so much more skill. I don't know what to expect from Mezzi just yet, but Woxic, top 20 player, Alex, probably the best captain on the free market. If Floppy joins, I mean, he's an up-and-coming talent too. This team not only is going to have a baseline level of skill because Alex is going to just kind of whip them into shape and Wox is just going to be a star opper, but they actually have a lot of room to grow also. So this team has kind of the best of both worlds on Floppy's end. It's a team that he knows will be growing, and it's a team that he knows is already going to be very strong.
Yeah, this is actually where, if people don't know, this was something which they've gone back and forwards on, as far as I know, like basically for the period since they sort of announced internally that they were going to do this move of building this new roster. Like, potentially it was already floated that maybe Floppy would be a member of it. It's why I actually made a point on Twitter that a lot of people missed. I did it just to kind of smoke out, are there actually other people in the scene who know what the fuck's going on? Or is it just a bunch of people on talk shows just doing what in English we call Chinese whispers, where one person just repeats one thing, then the other one goes, I've heard this. It's like, what they mean is they just heard a guy 5 minutes earlier say it. Like, when you say I heard, that's supposed to mean you yourself know something from when they're in the scene, not just like repeating. Here is a sound I heard once. Like, that's not what I heard means. So the point is, it had been floated that maybe he would join. That's why you've probably seen recently there was all that hubbub about it's not just that like they're leaving as a team, like they wanted to stay together and all that. So if you notice, when they announced that they were going to like rehome the new lineup, they never said anywhere within the post that all 5 players would definitely go. What they said was that they were completely restructuring their lineup. Now, every journalist in the world took completely restructuring to mean all 5 players will not be playing on the team, which is not the same thing, actually. They took one leap too far there. I know, by the way, I don't blame them. That does sound like completely structured. It sounds like you're saying I'm placing all 5. But you have to realize, technically, if we're just going to be like just police in that sense, restructured could just mean like, right, I'm moving him from this job to this job. So technically Floppy stay would count for that. So what I would say is this, I personally think it's the best move for both sets of people, because if you look at the market of who they're trying to get into this team, actually Floppy's the kind of player that they want in this lineup. Because as I pointed out on the last episode, they've done quite a good job in Cloud9 of like managing the risk of making an entirely new lineup by going different routes. You've got like Alex was like already one of the best IGLs. He was just on the bench. So it's very unusual a player like that's available. Of course, you're going to get that. It's like one of the pieces you're actually hoping is a slam dunk and is good out the door. Woxic is just way too good to be as bad as he is at the moment. So he's a pretty good gamble that he'll get his shit together and that if Lands come back, maybe he's a better player. The Mezzi guy is the biggest gamble by the fact he's never, ever been relevant. But he also, based on the things I've heard, is one of those rare examples of someone who hasn't been relevant, but there's like a good reason as to why he might still be a good player. Like, basically, he's not going to be some FPL wizard who's just going to shoot everyone in the head. It's more about the ID, some like undiscovered super-duper support player. Then if you had Floppy, well, Floppy's the guy who already shown massive potential and growth this year, already looks like almost good enough to be in a lineup with some of these players. And so he's basically that far from just basically being good already. And to me, I won't say who the 5th player is. It's not determined yet. But put it this way, the 5th player, another trick they did in Cloud9, which is quite clever, is the way that they announced things has thrown people off the trail completely. So everyone thinks like, well, if that Mezzi guy was second out the gate, it can't be that good. No, that's the trick. They've given you the dumbest one, on, like second in line. Like the people who come last are going to be way higher profile than the Mezzi guy. Like, you could have heard of the last players. So all I'll say is the last ones will actually be legit players who probably will round out the squad quite well. So to me, to tie into what actually Mauisnake was saying, the best thing about Floppy staying in this team to me is that he's not going to get like the biomass and phase treatment where it's like, right, we've got all these big name players, so you just get like whatever's left and we're just going to ruin you. If anything, if you look at who they have in this team, the main stars of the team should be Woxic and Floppy. Like, actually, he has a chance to be a star player and be not just in a good team, but be one of the best players in it. So I actually think it's a good move for both parties.
Well, it's also, I mean, Floppy hasn't had a chance to play with teammates of this caliber before. So in terms of his personal evolution, one would think that this would help him a lot.
Yeah, I would say that I think people are looking at Floppy and it's like potential here. I think he's already past it. Like, he's already reached, like, he can get a little better, but he's already really damn good. Like, this guy is like, he could fit on a lot of top 15 teams and be a really solid piece for those teams. So I don't think we necessarily need to see Floppy grow in a way. I think the one player we need to see grow is probably just Mezzy, just because he hasn't been tested at this level. Like Duncan was saying, that it's just, I mean, I looked at his games and I haven't really seen him play any top 30 teams and do any real damage against anyone. So I think he had like one series against a top 30 team and he did decently. So you can hope that he's going to do well because of the personality traits that people are ascribing to him, that he's hardworking, that he's dedicated, that he's just like he's probably a really easily coachable person. But Floppy, on the other hand, you don't need this guy to grow if you already want this to be a good team. Alex, Woxic, Floppy, that's already a very strong core. That's a really good trio.
Yeah. That's why I say it's actually it's not just the players they've got. It's like the reasons why they've gone for each player that I like with the Cloud9 approach. Basically, if anyone doesn't know this, it's actually what the entire skill of being a GM in sports is like. Because since in traditional sports, the GM, like technically you always have like some cap you're working with anyway. So even if it's European soccer, is my team as rich as the other ones? Whatever your like variable that you're working with overall, it's all about what you do within that, obviously. So as a result, they're at like, I know people won't know this who are just casual fans. But some of the most legendary sports GMs aren't the guys whose teams won the NBA or the NHL or whatever. They're the people who took like squads or like small market teams that had no business even being relevant and made like, winning traditions out of them, attracted big free agents there. So to me, I just like the fact that what they've understood within the Cloud9 approach is we're not going to do one of or the other. We're not just going to buy the best team in the world for the most money, which is actually the worst money play you can make right now because you get them at least from it. We're not going to do what we did previously, which is gamble on like a nobody team, and if you get anything out of them, it's good. It's like there's got to be something between the two, which involves having a real methodology.
So along that line, there's another rumor that we have to address on the show because people are asking about it, which is that so daps has already announced that he is no longer going to be playing on Gen.G. There's now a rumor that Som is going to be joining him and that they are going to be going to Valorant with I'm a Pet, the very short tenured coach of 100 Thieves, right? So what are your thoughts on these players potentially leaving Gen.G? Because for a while there, looking like Gen.G was a top 10 team with this roster.
It's frustrating because Gen.G were only getting better, it felt like. After Flashpoint, we were kind of disappointed in what they did at Flashpoint because it felt like, where's the structure? Where are the win conditions for this team? But they actually surprised me in that pretty much every tournament after Flashpoint, they just got better and better. They looked better. Things were getting more cohesive in late round situations. You could tell their comms were getting better. It looked like Bentet was integrating himself very well for this roster. And that's like, I feel like when you have Bentet on your team, that's just such an exciting prospect that once he actually can speak English at the level that you need him to, or to just understand everything and process it well, you have a world beater talent right there. Like, that's a player that could have been top 20 in the world if he were born in another part of the planet. So the fact that they're ditching him now, or rumored to be ditching him now, and leaving Automatic also, when we've seen how good of a player he can be, like, it's disappointing for the landscape of Counter-Strike. I'll say that.
Just to clarify, Maui means that these players might be ditching Bentet and the team. He doesn't mean that Gen.G, the team, is ditching Bentet. Just in case.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's what.
Yes.
I'm not saying that. Yeah. Okay. So after that clarification, it's just, if some daps and Chet end up making a Valorant team, I'm sure it'll be good. I think that with those kinds of with that kind of skill and work ethic on the team, you're just bound to succeed in the Valorant landscape right now. The only problem is just that for Flashpoint and for Gen.G, it's just like you're losing out on kind of the identity of the team a little bit. It's going to be rough for them to rebuild.
I think it's sad because the actual talent they had, if they'd have even just taken the lineup from Flashpoint 1, they would have had a chance to actually win Flashpoint 2. Like, they had the pieces to potentially do it. Like, I actually think they were far and away the most underwhelming team at Flashpoint 1. I know there was some extenuating circumstances, like daps decided to go right back to Canada and play with like fucking 100 ping or whatever, but that alone didn't excuse the actual end results when you look at who else the field was. Like, worst case scenario, that team should be in top 4. And that's like worst case scenario. So to me, massive performance. But I agree with Mauisnake. In general, they've been better and better since then. It's true that haven't had any monster results because unfortunately their best result came super early in the online era, and after that there was always like Furia was too good, EG became by far the best, Team Liquid got good again. So their problem was just they were like 4th or 5th best in a region where no one really gives a fuck unless you're top 2, basically. Like, unfortunately, NA isn't going to get the same credit as EU. So we just, at the moment, like, you've just seen it with EG. It's like, it's almost impossible to get the #1 ranking in the world. You have to just be like so far ahead of NA that they just go, maybe that's better than being good in EU. So to me, there's so much they could have done with it. I do think once daps left the active lineup, though, there's a world in which they could also have gotten way worse. Like, I have no idea who they even had plans to bring in. Like, the moves they're doing at the moment make it sound as though Automatic's going to try and be IGL excellent. That would be my guess from the outside, because I can't see who else there is to even bring in as a free agent. And then the other thing...
As a crazy idea.
And then the other thing to bring in is, I mean, at this point in time, Fallen hasn't proven he can work with fucking new players for about 4 years. So maybe I get a time machine for that one first. No, the thing is, I also think, just as an aside, Mauisnake will appreciate this. One of the things I actually hate, I actually despise, I'm repulsed by about the character of daps the man, is that he's so forgiving. And I hate that, because it's something that, out of a point of principle, there are certain things and people I will never forgive. I don't even care if they say sorry. Like, I won't destroy them. I won't smite their entire family lineage, but they can't ever come back from that point. daps is actually willing to let I'm a Pet be involved in another project with him after I'm a Pet facilitated him being cut from, like, what, 2 projects so far? Like, is this a fucking joke? Like, this guy has completely cocked you multiple times. And then when he's like, oh, I'm down on hard luck, you're like, yeah, me too. Do you want to set up a new project you can cut me for? Like, this guy's unbelievable. Like, you're like, if the frog had survived the first trip with the scorpion and only been lightly stung, and then the scorpion's like, can you give me a trip back though? And you were like, well, didn't die the first time. They're like, no, unbelievable, that's mental, mate. So I'm just going to put that out there, like, what an unbelievable human being. This is why it's cool in the Bible for Jesus to be all like that, because it's just a fucking story. So in your mind, you imagine, you anthropomorphize the greatest man who ever lived. In real life, Jesus would have been straight cocked. That probably just... Okay, to be fair, we're not like 100 years ago, so that can't be against TOS to say Jesus was straight cocked. It's just offensive to people who are religious, so whatever.
Jesus was straight cocked. Yep.
In that regard, you know, he was literally like, turn the other cheek. He's like, no, backhand their cheek. That's the response, Jesus.
Eye for an eye.
Exactly. No, it's, exactly. It's that's actually my move, Mostly. I go back in a time machine. Jesus got, as if Jesus was real, but whatever. In this world where he is, let's just pretend he is for now. And then he goes, turn the other cheek. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure eye for an eye. And they're like, check around there. Like, yep, it is eye for an eye around here. Like, kill that guy. I just undo everything he did.
Well, after that
enough about I'm a Pet
of Christianity,
and,
it seems like this I'm a Pet guy is really just the razor cake that daps keeps eating.
It's because the two of them together as well, right? Have the most, like, they're like they're not at all confrontational people. So that's also why it makes perfect sense, actually, that they've both been in these scenarios multiple times. Because if the worst teammates, I've always said, I wonder what Maui thinks of this. I don't mind the guys that rage or the guys who are like smoothie and are just an arsehole, right? Because they're just such a known quantity. Like, first of all, they're obviously only in your team because they're good at that point in time. And then secondly, once you know they're a bit of an arsehole, if anything, you like the fact that, like, you don't have to wonder, oh, I wonder if smoothie is enjoying it. You just know. The worst guys are the ones who just sit there like, or like they're at the LAN, and you just know that the second you're not there, they've got those like fucking Steam messages to just one other person in the team, and they're just writing fucking novels like that. You just hear that typing, and you're like, "What's this motherfucker writing about all of us right now?" That's the worst teammate in the world to have.
The worst teammate is the guy that he uses push to talk, and it's like just something on his keyboard, and you just hear like after he dies in a round, you just hear this like clicker clacker just kind of stuff, and you're just like, and you know he's just typing to the coach or something like that. And it's like what, can he just tell us what's wrong with the team? You know, just be open with it.
Yeah, you're like, Jesus, give me a break.
I don't want the guy that's like actually going to therapy.
This is just the equivalent of like passing notes in class, but there isn't a teacher to make you read it in front of everybody, right? So
yeah, give me the guy that doesn't need to go to therapy. Give me the guy that actually is just like open with everything. I don't need this like silent brooding character. I don't need the Lone Star guy. I need the guy that's just yelling. Like, whip everyone into get everyone like on your
reference.
Message. Yeah.
Here's a reference people know. So you know, like that classic show, The the West Wing, right, where it was showing like the way that like, the administrative office of like the US government runs when someone's in power over. And what they were trying to show you in that was like, how even the day-to-day of basic things in global politics is like super complicated. Like, for example, you're trying to get like this person to vote one way, but then to get this person, you have to get this other person to do it. Like, and it's always like basically like the equivalent of like, spinning plates, and you're always trying to keep them all going. And what they try to show is that the skill is like sort of knowing that like this one's going to fall away, but then you're going to put this contingency plan here. It's like in the same sense. Fuck, I can't remember where I was going with that.
If everyone just thought like Aaron Sorkin, I mean, life would be a lot more complicated.
That's where I was going though. But what's sad is people don't know how many pro teams are like that, and that's how the lifespan of the team runs. What really decides the team isn't the results; it's how people passively aggressively just do like Game of Thrones politics around the results. So the best example ever, I'll just give everyone this very quick anecdote, was way back in the day. Lurpis, who obviously works now with MIBR, when he used to be a pro player in Finland. He was like far and away the best in-game leader Finland had ever had, because unfortunately they actually were a bit like NA, where they had loads of talents, but they had almost no one who wanted to be an IGL or do strats. So that like people like Lurpus were like the unicorn in that sense. Well, what's mad is, as a result, he was like the one player in theory you couldn't cut from his teams. But he said every time they would cut a player, it would just be like that. There would be like 5 conversations going on simultaneously, all like one versus one, and they would all be trying to do like draft day negotiations to see like who was going to get cut. And so it was like you were trying to cut this guy, but then the problem is your friend doesn't want him cut and he wants this guy cut. So now you have to decide, do I shift my allegiance? And so the best one ever was when Lurpus said this was going on, where potentially everyone except one guy could have been cut. He himself could even have just stepped in and been like, well, I actually have the connection to the org, so I could just overrule this anyway. So eventually when they decided that it was actually him they were going to cut, he actually just said like, you know what, I just can't be fucking bothered with this anymore, and just let them cut him and just said, fuck it, I'm just going to leave it. It's so stupid. Because he knew on the time they were cutting him, like the same people cutting him were like having other conversations like, we could cut the other guy as well. So it's like, it's the most, that's what teams really were like back in the day, guys. It's actually ridiculous. That's why we need GMs, real GMs.
Not much has changed.
It's like it's always Sunny scene where Charlie's just like has that giant board of just stuff with the strings on it. Just that's what you have to put together if you're on these teams.
It's so complicated.
It is still that way for the most part across esports. You'd be surprised, people, how often this happens among ostensibly professional teams, that this bullshit still goes on. One question I wanted to ask you, going back to the SOM daps thing. So from a Gen.G perspective, obviously losing the IGL is pretty rough, but SOM had a really great performance when they won at DreamHack, but has faltered, I would say, ever since then, and hasn't lived up to that peak that he had. Do you think he was kind of on the chopping block? I think even now his
stats are still pretty shit, if I remember.
Yeah.
Do you think he was like kind of on the chopping block anyway for this roster?
I wouldn't say so, because the NA landscape is so thin. Like there's so few players that are actually quality that it's kind of hard to replace anybody. It's hard to see anyone on any top 3 NA team right now and be like, yeah, we should get rid of that guy. Because honestly, who are you gonna get? The best replacements were probably on Swole Patrol, and half of that team just went to Valorant, and the other half are probably considering what they're doing next. So it's tough to say that SOM should be replaced, because SOM kind of strikes me as a Woxic type in the way that he probably just on LAN he can get fired up, he'll frag out, he'll look like a star, but online the monotony of just, every day sitting in your gamer chair and just hoping for something different is it's pretty tough for him.
The problem I have is I just looked it up now. Like stats wise, he's terrible. Like basically, he's the worst player who isn't daps, and daps is already expected to like low frag. So stats wise, it's been terrible even online. Like he dies way more than he kills people, put that way. That's not a good start if you're going to be a star player, obviously. But then also, to me, the big problem I have with him as a player is, like, that is easily the most replaceable player in the entire scene. It's like, I'm a young guy who has, like, good aims. Like, get a fucking line and get number and get in line. Like, we are never going to run out of people like you. A young guy who can just shoot people in there. Like, that's the one thing in Counter-Strike we'll never run out of. Like, put it this way. That's why I said, to me, I think actually he was replaceable. I don't know if he would be in the sense that, like, I don't know how much money people are willing to spend if it's another gamble. Like, if I replace a player like him, I probably want someone established. I don't want to just gamble on another guy like that. So it probably does put aside people like the Zeppa guy from Chaos, etc. I think are actually better players, but
yeah,
it's the same gamble you make at that point in time, isn't it? Like a not very experienced guy into a big team. So the big problem I have for that whole approach is, as soon as, like, they know daps is gone, you basically have to reformulate the whole team at that point in time. Like, Unless you're getting some super in-game leader, what's the point in making one move? You probably should reformulate the whole thing.
What do you guys think about the possibility of Obo joining Gen.G, considering that one of his issues with being on Complexity was that, he's a young American guy, didn't want to spend as much time in Europe, so being on an NA roster that's based in California instead seems like a pretty good fit, right, if he wants to continue on his professional career.
Obo is the best NA free agent right now, or bench player. Yeah, just flat out. He more than proved himself on Complexity. I want to say he was like top 3 rated, and on a team with Config and Poison and Blame F and himself. Like that's really good company to be keeping. And the fact that he's been part of a lineup now that's beaten Astralis on LAN. They've beaten some really good teams, and Obo has kind of been just silently grinding in Europe, just like Goku in the hyperbolic time chamber or something. The way he just kind of hung out there for a while. He's coming back, and he's probably like, I've been hyping up Floppy for a long time, but I think Obo has surpassed him in the last few months. Like, Obo is insane now. He's really, really damn good.
Yeah, I think actually the thing that probably will throw people off with Obo is that just because of the nature of how desperate people are for like young players to be better than they are, and especially like young NA players, people want like the next stars to be here already. The problem is everyone already overhyped the guy last year when he was in the old Complexity because he had a couple of like, decent maps like every now and then. So as a result, when I say now that he's actually a good player, people are going to be like, yeah, he's right. It's like, no, you've actually missed the whole point. The whole point was that he wasn't for a year. And that, as Maui's saying, in a team with much better players on paper and bigger names, you would expect he could actually end up being the guy who's sort of the odd man out and pushed to one side and given the shit roles, and you just take it because he's the young guy. I actually think, yeah, he's proved a lot on Complexity. Like, he seems like the most obvious pickup right now, because actually, if anything, on another team, he could probably be a better player. Like, I'm sure in that team, they did have some of the spots locked down for bigger names. So I thought he did a very good job, like, improving every couple of months in the newer call lineup, and actually now would have been in theory if we'd have gone line where you really see how good he could be.
The Obo story kind of reminds me of the Brawlin story, where everybody when Brawlin was getting on Fnatic was like, you guys need to see what this guy can do. You guys need to know, like, he can do it. And then it's like, okay, he had a 1.05 rating for, I don't know, like 10 months or something like that. But then he kind of turned the page at one point and just started becoming the star and started hard carrying Fnatic in games. And Obo has kind of become that, where he can just like completely lock down his positions and just look so fantastic now. And it's like, it's kind of like, because like with Brawlin, like everyone was so hyping him up, overhyping him, they needed to let him develop. And now that he's actually developed, it's going to take a while for the community to recognize that no, Obo's kind of reached that level that everyone was hoping for. He's there now, guys. So just everyone needs to keep their eyes open for him.
Cool. Let's talk about some other topics. We can address the ESIC bans and their durations justified and appropriate in length. We have not made an announcement about how we're going to tackle these bans yet, because I was waiting to see what additional news was going to be issued from the ESIC, as well as getting a sense of which coaches, how many, what the ban lengths are. We will be doing that shortly. I think you can expect that in the next week or so, that we will make an announcement about our reaction to this. One thing that, and we can talk about these bans conceptually as well. One thing that I personally don't really understand is giving clemency for admitting to using the bug. At least in my perspective, if you cheat, then you cheat and you get punished for it. And so I suppose with me, I don't really agree with that part of their kind of giving people lesser time in the bans because they admitted to using it when these VODs were going to be reviewed anyway. And why did it take this information coming out for them to come forward? I also think that it applies a bit of a double standard to the people that were already outed. So people like Dead or Hunden, who didn't really even have a chance to say that they used the bug because it was just announced, right? And then other people had the opportunity to come forward. So it does seem to me to have a little bit of a double standard. Your guys' thoughts on it?
Problem is, like, no one really is willing to address that because people don't even understand that basic premise. Like, I've tried explaining that, and all I get back from people who are also in the industry is they don't listen to what you're saying. They just go, well, it's like like they've like helped like shorten the investigation. They haven't. Like, this is like if the police was like, by the way, we've preliminarily caught you in a raid that we're doing on a load of people in your area, and you say, right, well, here's exactly how I did the crime, and they're, well, you don't need to do that, mate. We're going to catch you anyway. We've got all the like, no, but if I tell you how I did it, though, since I know you've caught me, can I get like half the sentence? No, you wouldn't. You would just get fucking prosecuted. What gets you a lower sentence is this: coming forwards when you may not be caught, helping them catch someone else.
Correct.
Or a third one would be something like if like an amnesty scenario where they could never catch you, but you're willing to come forward and go, look, I did actually do it in like 2015. You know, you might not be able to catch me, but for the sake of setting the record clean, I'm willing to do it now. And you'd give that guy a lesser sentence to encourage people to come forwards. The point is, I agree. The incentive is enormous. There's almost no downside, and you're not actually doing anything. You cheated anyway. So I think that's to one side. I would like to know from Mauisnake, since you obviously actually were briefly doing some work as a coach, and it's a path you could have gone down. What do you just think generally? Because if people don't know, it's been heavily hinted that like another area, even outside of the coaching bug, but I've no doubt they're going to get hit by that as well, is that a lot of the fucking like tier that you were in NA of MDL level people, just match fixing, coaching abuse, apparently it's going to hit them like a fucking like a Mack truck. And so what do you think in general about this aspect? Because I noticed, by the way, one thing that's puzzling to me, this is why you know there must be so many people abuse that bug, dude. The amount of leniency from public opinion so far is bonkers. Dude, all you have to do is take the word coaching bug and replace it with actual wall hack. And all everyone's statements become mental. It's like, but he only used an actual wall hack for one round in a World Championship qualifier. Like, these sentences become mental. So I want to get your take on it. Like, are you a guy who's like a zero tolerance guy? When do you come down, Mauisnake? What do you think?
I'll say
going to be your peers, right?
Yeah. I'll say this about the leniency or the reduction in sentence, that Jose Canseco has told us many times he's using performance enhancing drugs. He's still not in the Hall of Fame, so I think they're doing it right over there in a way. But at the same time, with it being my peers, I see the humanity aspect of it a lot. That a lot of these guys, they don't have salaries. They are just grinding this game day in, day out. They have no future that they can see of making any kind of money off of it. So when I see that, and I know that some of my peers are being indicted on these charges, that they're probably going to be hit with these match fixing calls, I see that where they're coming from is a position where if they wanted to keep playing Counter-Strike, they would not have been able to play it at the same level if maybe if there was a match that went the other way, or like if they didn't fix one match or something like that. I'm not going to say I know who it is or anything like that, but I know that a lot of the guys that are in the MDL scene and circuit, just like they're maybe working a part-time job, but then there's pressure from whoever they're living with, like their family or something like that, someone else, that they need to make some money. So they need to, it's kind of like, should we just say, okay, then don't choose this line of work, don't play Counter-Strike at all? Because the only way that they could play Counter-Strike at even the tier 2 level is by supplementing their funding with a match fix or two. So from that sense, I'm upset about. I see kind of why. I'm just saying I see why they did it. I don't condone it. But I wish there were just like an injection of funds that kind of went into that tier 2 scene.
Let me describe this in a different way. Like, I understand what you're saying. Most people, especially in early esports, they will account boost for money, right? Because that's the way that they can sustain it. However, account boosting, unless you're in Korea now, which they made it a crime, fixing matches for betting is literally a felony.
Yeah, I don't think that's the best path.
I just want there to be a real scene in a movie, right? Well, because obviously Korea has a very vibrant cinema, and Mauisnake knows, right? What I want is a real scene in a movie where it's a bunch of guys. It's like that classic scene, and they're like, "What are you in for?" It's like, armed robbery went bad. And the other guy goes like, "I'm Apto" or something. Like, "Oh my god!" Like everyone in the prison is like, "Oh my god!" I boosted 4,000 accounts in the challenge, and they're like, "Holy shit!" Like, that's the scene I want to see in the movie. No, the thing I wanted to say was this: even though I totally actually do fuck with the vibe of what Mauisnake was making there, if people don't know, I'll just give you a little Easter egg. I don't actually even like some of the fucking cunts I've had to support over the last few years in esports. I just did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. I could understand the background some of them were coming from in some of the mistakes they made in their careers. So I get that angle. Like, I agree. You have to understand like where someone's coming from, what their life circumstances are. The problem with this is, Mauisnake, you've sort of attempted to make the like very basic philosophical argument of like, but wouldn't you steal a loaf of bread to feed your family? Except you're doing what the worst criminals do, which is they use that logic and you go, I mean, I guess you would if it was bread for your family. And they're like, well, bread really is just a commodity, and in our society, like, wouldn't this Rolex be the equivalent of a Rolex? Like, no, actually, at that point, that's not bread. That's not fiat. So I'm going to say something similar. Actually, it isn't actually necessary in any context for anyone to play professional video games.
No,
so
yeah.
Actually, them cheating in one game definitely isn't like stealing a loaf of bread for their family.
Yeah,
so
by the way,
I get the premise. I'm on both sides on this one, but like,
Aladdin,
I'm just saying, I'm not going bleeding heart on this one. I think they should be fucked.
Aladdin is definitely Mauisnake's favorite Disney hero.
He probably thinks Aladdin did nothing wrong.
Yeah, I can show these players a whole new world though, in that the best way to try to make money off of the game, if you're not making it from playing, is content or streaming, or like there's so many avenues now to try to like make some bread. And it's not like throwing is, a get rich quick kind of scheme, and all of those come back to bite you. There's not,
Sure.
I mean, for the most, so like honestly, just like any player out there that's hurting for funds, just, I mean, get ready to stream, get ready to make YouTube videos, try to like do coaching lessons or something that's legitimate. There's ways to make a lot of money.
Boost.
I mean, sure, yeah. I mean, okay,
Not if you're
legitimately,
Korean, though.
Thing is, though, jokes aside, what I was alluding to there is actually the way you actually tried to analyze the scenario, though, by the way, is the way I actually think that all these scenarios should be analyzed. As in, you don't just take it as like, right, I'm going to view this crime in pure isolation of who the person is, and I'm going to give them the maximum sentence in every case. I'm not going to look at any context. Of course not. Like, for example, there's a reason why you can actually murder someone in a crime of passion and you will not get the same sentence as if you just cold-bloodedly sat down and planned out the exact same kind of a murder, but just totally premeditated. There's a reason why one gets a much higher sentence and one is certainly not frivolous, but like you can potentially sort of like be given some leniency. So I would just say, in general, I wish in esports, I'd go the other way about it, because obviously, like I haven't defended, but I've argued in favor of the people, the match fixers getting unbanned. And the whole reason why is I actually do have compassion for them. Like I understand that they didn't sit down like some super scheme and figure out what the consequences of this were and what it would affect. No, they didn't. So their mistake certainly should be punished, but not to like the nth degree, to like the maximum possible. So I just wish people would do the same thing when someone slips up and says something stupid that you're not allowed to say. Like consider like, who is this person? What is their background? Like one of the areas I've always gone to bat for people is where a guy from a totally different country is speaking his second language in a totally different culture he's never lived in. And then people go, oh, you've just broken one of the secret rules of being American. It's like, well, he lives in Russia. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Punish him to the nth degree. It's like, no, that's bullshit, guys. So I hope people, bearing in mind, by the way, most problems in the world, like racism, sexism, bigotry, tend to be problems of ignorance where someone doesn't know the life experience of the people they're judging, usually indiscriminately. Here's the point. If you can understand that premise, that you hope that the person who's bigoted can see the life perspective of other people, you have to do the same thing. You have to give them the same courtesy and ask, who is this person? What's their background? How did they act in this way? Because otherwise, by the way, you don't actually make a great society where everyone follows. You just make a society where you hit everyone with the hardest punishment, and now it's just a nightmare scenario. Like what you want is a world where everyone tries to see everyone's perspective, and then we be as fair as we can to each other.
That's a great philosophy to have on life. I think in terms of the philosophy that we have when it comes to how we're going to deal with these cheaters, I think we've discussed that it is a little weird to kind of lower their bans by the idea that confessing actually did something, because in my mind it did not. And I do think, as Thorin is alluding to, that you have to offer like a way for people to get back in. And I think that as we've seen, some of these coaches are being transitioned into being analysts in the short term, which obviously is not as active a role, but it doesn't destroy their entire careers. So that seems like a kind of compromise to me, in a way where you can suspend them from being the head coach, suspend them from being on stage, but not say that you can't contribute in any way to the Counter-Strike scene and offer a way for them to get back into those roles eventually. Because a lot of these people, you don't want to lose forever, and hopefully they've learned their lesson, right?
I don't think they could even theoretically stop them. Like, actually,
no, you wouldn't.
If Hunden behind the scenes just wanted to keep feeding heroic information about strats and they just paid him under the table, like, what's anyone gonna do?
Right. And obviously you have to take into account the number of times they did it, the circumstances in which they were cheating. These are all relevant. But I do think that any cheating at all has to be hit with a pretty hard punishment, and I don't think that hard punishment can or should be lessened by confessing, which does nothing and didn't result in catching anybody else and didn't result in them being caught faster, because all the demos had to be reviewed anyway, guys, so it was going to happen regardless. The fact that this was going on for years and you didn't confess earlier is damning enough in my book. Did they rule out live fans for Flashpoint 2? There will be no live fans for Flashpoint 2. I can say that right now.
Some would say there weren't any live fans for Flashpoint. you the joke, whatever. They write themselves.
Whatever, we actually only have robot fans, bot fans,
exactly.
For Flashpoint. That's the rule. Aren't coaches still able to coach but not be in games? Yes, that's what an analyst is. Again, we can't stop people from hiring them as part of their sort of general coaching infrastructure, but they can't be on stage, on comms with the
As
team.
Mauisnake says, just logistically, how would you manage it? We can't just like banish all these fuckers to Corsica like fucking Napoleon or something. For the,
toss them into the
years,
Phantom Zone and eject them into space like Superman. No, we can't do that.
Once we kick them out of the actual slot in the server called courts, that's about all we can do at that point in time. It's like, after that, like, we don't have any jurisdiction in the real world, I'm afraid. Like,
if MIBR were unable to get a Brazilian roster, do you think they can be replaced by the Immortals brand if they were to go international? I would think, without knowing their plans, that would probably be a pretty logical course of action. But I
don't think anything prohibits it, if that's what they're asking, by the way. This isn't like our league, if you've noticed already, uses the original brand. So technically, you can probably change the name. Like, I'm sure FPX, if they wanted to, could change it. Anyone could change their name, as far as I know.
Yeah.
It's not like Overwatch League or whatever, where you have to keep the one slot name or whatever the fuck.
It's not even just Immortals. I mean, we've had the Optic brand in Counter-Strike before, too, and they own Optic. So as far as I'm concerned, I really don't care which brand they use. That will be their
Optic would even be the smarter brand to use if they wanted to revitalize that, just because like it's got an FPS background on it.
Yeah, and MIBR is
a Counter-Strike history. That's
it's
better
kind of been
than
tarnished.
Oh, that's terrible now.
Yeah, MIBR now evokes a feeling from the community where people are like, it's a kind of joke. It's become a joke a little bit. So Immortals actually has a little bit of a legacy. I mean, they came top 2 at a major.
Fair enough.
True.
With Gen.G, actually. So
there wouldn't be any Gen.G in this lineup. But, no. We'll see.
Let's see here. Question about Liquid. Does Liquid need a dedicated op to survive with their current roster? So what's your take on the current Liquid roster after adding Grim, and if they need an opper?
No, but they need to know where they're getting their kills from, because I looked at their first kill percentages recently, and it's like, it's a lot of it's Stewie, a lot of it's a Liege, but then it kind of just tapers off in a way where I don't even think they're really setting up a Liege or Stewie in a way. And that's kind of a thing for online Counter-Strike that has been bad for a lot of North American teams, where you can tell that they haven't like really clearly outlined where their first point of contact is with the team, and it just feels like they let the game come to them in a way that has clearly not been consistent or successful. And I think that's a reason for like Furious success in the online era and big success in the online era, is that you can always tell what was the plan this round, like what are they doing. But for Liquid, sometimes it's like, who was trying to take that first fight there, where they just if you let the other team play on their own terms, you're gonna lose a lot. You're gonna always feel like you're on the back foot, and you always have to respond to things and come up with answers. Instead, you should be the one that's throwing questions at the other team. And if Stewie's not like a big question mark for a lot of people, like people know the plays that he makes. And I'll say this, like, I don't think Liquid is innovating at the level that Fury is constantly. Like, we're seeing Fury bust out new boosts and shit, like, that's like new strats, new kind of like new plays all the time. Liquid have kind of just fell into this zone of just I feel like they are too complacent, and if they get a new op, yes, it will help, because then they know, and it outlines to them, this is the guy that's supposed to be finding contact early on in the rounds, because you always want that op to go for that first pick. But at the same time, Liquid, when they were really good, their game plan just kind of was like this heavy hitting, a lot of fast plays that you knew what was coming. But now I feel like they've slowed it down in a way that they just haven't. It just doesn't feel like they always know how a round is supposed to start for themselves. So that could be with an op, or it could be with just a complete change in mentality, or like the coaching of it. There's just like what everyone believes, or just like come up with a game plan is really my main thing.
I don't think technically any team needs to have an AWP. Like I've always been someone who thought that was massively overrated. The idea that like you have to have an AWP. Like to me, that's like people in basketball who just repeat like who basically for decades were against the idea of playing small ball because the logic is like, but it's a big man's game. It's like that's some shit people said 60 years ago. What you have to ask yourself is why did they say it 60 years ago? Now, if it made sense, which it did at the time, but there's no 3-point line, the entire game was a million possessions where you just take a load of shots down low. Like it was a big man's game. So in the same sense, people just say that because that is just one of the easy ways to make a Counter-Strike team. Have a really good AWPer, right? Well, that's taken care of. He can play all those spots. Then here's how this player will play off the AWPer. Like we've seen in Counter-Strike, you can have some amazing rifle teams. I mean, classically, like Fnatic when they were at their peak, that wasn't just AWPing all the time. And even then, the AWPing was like a very unorthodox approach to AWPing. So like, I think a lot of great teams have made do without like a constant dedicated AWPer. And the key thing is, if I don't have a mega AWPer, but I also have some of the absolute best riflers, I also don't need it in that sense. I can go counter to the meta. My problem is that like they're not winning with the lineup they have now. So that's why it does make it look like you need an AWPer, because the other approach isn't working yet. Like they haven't found an awesome aspect. Like I agree with you, Mauisnake. Like the worst thing about Team Liquid at the moment is they should be defining their entire region, but actually their entire region is like what the Furia and EG do. Like they're just a really good team where I agree with you. The thing about Furia that is impressive to me is the reason nobody can ever stop Furia is because every time you play Furia, you're just reacting to them all the time. Now, you can beat them. You might still be better than them, but you're just constantly trying to figure out what do you do against art? What do you do against this like style that no one else has? So in my opinion, like Liquid hasn't done a very good job of identifying like who they're supposed to be as a team. They're just a bunch of good players right now. And obviously they have just reshuffled everything, bringing in Moses. So if you were going to bring in an AWPer, it also has to be someone amazing. Like Wardell, a push might have been worth trying just because of where he was at a few months back. If you were bringing someone in now, though, that's the issue. I don't want to just bring in any. Like, for example, I know I saw people like, what about OC? And say, why the fuck would I want him in Team Liquid? Like, what has he ever done to show me he would be a world-class AWPer? If you bring someone in, it has to be like Cirque or someone. It has to be a fucking big hitter where, like, it's worth reformulating how we do the team because a guy could make us the best in the world.
Yeah, in all honesty, also, if you're Twist and a Liege and you see someone that's not a top 10 AWPer in the world, you're going to wonder, why are we letting this guy be the first point of contact in our rounds and not ourselves? Because Elige is still, like, even though I'm questioning the way they start rounds, Elige is still really good on entries, and he's still really good at finding picks, even with a rifle.
Let's see here. On the topic of admins, role doesn't seem like a viable career option, like Mihao alluded. Do you think TOs should try to incorporate admins to the broadcast to get some exposure? No, that's not necessary. First off, being an admin is a viable career path. Face It at least has salaried admins, and I know Mihao was, in fact, salaried at ESL. Now, why he's doing, decided to go freelance, I can't say, but ESL, considering that they literally have next year announced that 40% of the days of the calendar year are going to be tournaments, you would think that combined with planning for those events, not to mention the 40% of the days of the year that you're actually running events, would be more than enough for a full-time position, right? That is 100%. Probably several people's full-time jobs. You know what I mean?
I think what that guy was alluding to instead is more along the line, like not that you can't literally have a job. Like obviously you can. It's been a job for a long time. I think he means in terms of like where the career path goes. Like for example, let's be real. Until this cheating thing with all the coaches, most fans didn't know who the Mihao guy was. They would have just known, oh, is he that top ESL? That's the problem, right? Is if you are like put it this way, anyone who knows the NBA knows this. If you know some of the really famous ones in the NBA who were the refs, like Joey Crawford, right? The fact that we know this guy is because he's like a mini celebrity inside the NBA. Sure. Like, I guarantee, I bet that guy makes like probably $1 million a year. He probably has a fucking pretty nice salary. So that's, I think, the angle he's going from is like, if you're the best in the world, which to me how goes, what guy was by all accounts, like there's not really a way, unfortunately, to actually parlay that into getting much of a better career for yourself. You probably just get like slightly more than whoever number 5 is at that job. And you haven't really got a way to distinguish yourself. Like, for example, if you ever did try to do a power player based on your branding, you really could just be chopped and changed with some random guy. Like if we have an event that's a Starlight, they're not going to be using the Mihao guy. They'll have some fucking guy from Ukraine who may be terrible for all I know. Maybe he's never done an event. Maybe he's done a million. You never know until a problem happens. So unfortunately, for me, admin is a bit like observer. It's a super vital role where you must do the job well, but you only know that someone did the job badly when it's done badly. That's it. So if you do the job too well, you're invisible and no one knows you exist. So that's why I've always gone out my way when I can to big up Prius and the people with the observers, the Slicky, because unfortunately, that's where I get like the premise maybe that they were coming from with that. At the moment, there just isn't a way for them to properly parlay the fact that they're the best at their job to the kind of salaries that like we're on. Like, obviously, they wouldn't get paid what we do, but they're so far from that right now. Like, they're more like what we were doing like 10 years ago, where we can have a job, but you're going to make 25,000 a year, and you're going to work really hard for the 25,000. You know?
Yeah, and just to be clear, it depends on the esport, because at least in League of Legends, refs are on stage, so they do get that time, and that's certainly an option that you could pursue if you wanted to have the refs on stage. But also, I think, unlike in traditional sports where the ref has a lot of agency to determine the penalties in games, right? So there's several things about this. First off, we don't need that because the games themselves apply the rules. Like, I can't do, for the most, obviously there are bugs and glitches that occasionally happen, but for the most part, players can only do what the game allows them to do. So we have way fewer need to call penalties or anything like that. It's very rare that we do. And also, I think a lot of these people haven't been empowered to decide those penalties. I'm not sure how ESL arrived at the bans they had or suspensions based on what happened. And maybe Mihao was a part of deciding that. But for the most part, that's not decided by, people at the admin level. So I think part of it too is giving them more agency to affect the outcome of their research and their work, right? That's what I would say.
True. Let's do like one more just because we started late. So do one more that's like a good one for Maui, maybe.
Okay. Let's see if I can find a good one.
Like if there's anything about up and coming NA players or something along those lines of things in that wheelhouse might be good.
I'm looking. Questions. I mean, there's a bunch of questions about European players we could go for.
Sure.
Or we could talk about, I don't know if you're passionate about this from a GM perspective, Maui, but talking about the financial details of player acquisitions. If you think that's a good idea, what do you want? Or do you want to talk about rumors about Rain potentially going to C9 or some of the other phase players? What do you want?
Sure, we could
grab bag.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
It's no joke. This is how I can always tell a real rumor and one that's from a clout chaser. The real clout chasers just pull them out of their arsehole. They just sit down and they don't go, right, what's plausible? Because the plausible one, right, if they actually did their job well, they might even accidentally get a real rumor. They never do that, of course. They just go, how about if JW joins Team Liquid? It's like, there's no basis to that whatsoever. They yeah, cool, I guess. So, which one do you want to do? Do you want to do the GM question or like the hypothetical C9 type?
What's the GM question that was out there?
Let's do that one.
Yeah, what is that about?
Seeing about. Okay, so let's do a two-parter. So Henry and C9 sharing some of the financial details of their recent player acquisitions. Do you think that's a good idea? Let's start there. And secondly, part two is, what would it look like if TOs did the same thing that they hire for talent for events, which is an interesting spin on it for sure.
Both parts, I would say revealing everything's fine. I think that's really how you empower the worker, and workers should want to know their coworker salaries, because if you're trying to be logical about it, or you're trying to just be fair about it, equitable, it's really in their best interest to know, so that in their next agreement they can talk about if they think that their salary is fair. So I think what Henry's doing with revealing the salaries is actually leading us to what could easily be the most interesting era of Counter-Strike ever. I think once people can be backseat GMs and just like, the sofa GM or whatever, I think that raises a level of engagement for the game that Counter-Strike just doesn't have right now. I think right now, like, you don't really see on a lot of shows or like really anyone speculating like, oh, but this would be a good trade right here, like if these two players swapped out. But that's what we do all the time with real sports. We think about all the
it also makes off-season exciting, right?
Yeah, it makes off-season exciting. I mean, there's literally a football manager game. Like, people want to play this.
basically what Maui's referring to here is like right now we have like what they just said there were like rain to C9. Like people just pull a move out of their arse and just go like, hey, well that'll be a good move. Like my favorite ones, by the way, are the ones where it's like, why would the other side do that deal though? You know what? It's like, well, I just give you my best player and then you make a super team and win all the majors. It's like, cool. Why would I do that part of it? But they never factor that in because they're just thinking like fans. But as Mauisnake says here, if we all know, say in 2 years, roughly what everyone's salary is, now we can even do, by the way, legit analysis. Like someone can actually say, oh, actually, maybe they should consider, and then they say like, oh, instead of, in this case, I'm going to pick a random one. Instead of Bobski, they should take actually Acor because Acor is like a similar salary amount, but he looks like he's performed. Like they actually would have some of the variables to do real analysis at that point in time, not just fan thinking only. So I agree. I think that potentially has an interest. It could make basically discussion way more interesting because people have the variables you need to make the like sort of qualitative judgments you were talking about.
Yeah, I really think that also it's kind of just like we can usher in a new era of like sabermetrics essentially for esports if we know the salaries. But right now we don't know the like essentially the cap, like how much a team is willing to spend. We don't know how much a player is worth, what the buyout is. So we can't really I can't really tell you that this MDL player would be a good pickup for any top tier team, because why would you ever do that? Because I'm always under the assumption that these teams now have infinite salary, so why aren't you just getting the best free agent on the market? Sure. But if you want to bid someone that like you're only gonna have to pay $60K a year, then yeah, here's a new up and coming talent. Now all the research that I've done in terms of finding players in the tier 2 scene is actually going to be worthwhile, because as of right now I just can like I know who the best MDL players are, but like who needs this information? I have no idea, because I don't know who needs to fit something into a tighter salary.
Yeah, put it this way, if you go now on hltv.org, obviously I won't give you the names, but this is the real fact. I've looked it up right now. If you go and you look at the top 5 rankings in the world, there are players in the top 5 rankings right now where one player makes 4 times what one of the other players makes. Right now, ranked in the world. So I'm sure that player, the latter player, the one who makes 4 times less, I'm sure he'd like to know that it's exactly 4, but he doesn't right now. He probably guesses maybe it's 2, is it 3? I don't know. Were my mates lying to me when they told me the number? If he could just see on a piece of paper that was verified, that makes his negotiation very interesting. Put it this way, the players I'm talking about, the players I'm trying to get, like, I'm trying to essentially nudge and tell them, like, you know, a Flashpoint team would pay you a lot more than that org does. But right now they have no reason to know or believe that. It's just, to them, it's just hearsay, isn't it?
Right. And I think that that's key, at least from my perspective, is that I would like to do it because I would like all our information to be public to attract some of these players. If these players are on these teams and they're saying, hey, I could get paid more by joining a Flashpoint partner team, then I'm all about that. I think it's good PR if the players are open to having their salaries shared as well, and they opt into that system, then I think it's good. And in fact, I'm already having conversations about how we can best implement that system. As to the talent part of the question, I also think that's very interesting. And I do think that as a caster, there should be more publicly available information about talent contracts, because I think it would help talent across the entire industry. And that maybe that's something we also look into, because as Thorin and I have alluded, our goal is to do some more long-term talent deals. The problem with the way it is right now is you kind of just be reporting on event-by-event basis and day rates, which is not particularly interesting. However, if there is a larger package deal over, in the same way you'd sign a player contract over a number of years, I'm all for that. That would be great.
Yeah, I also think it'd be cool to have it on the talent side in the future. Like if we were signing someone to a 3-year deal in the same way as like you see now, like whatever fucking like what's like the newest version, probably like Tony Romo, I guess, will be the one people are thinking of now. People like to see that shit, like, oh, he's making this much. Yep. That means he's at the top of the field now. Like, by the way, the reason why I say we might do that ourselves is because we also have nothing to hide. Like, I think when people find out that some of our rivals pay people less, good. I want that for people to find that out. Not only because it bigs us up, but it means our rival has to potentially step up to the plate.
Or the talent comes over to us. Either way, talent wins. They get paid more money. You know, we can make these announcements, and I think we'll look good in all of this.
I think as talent, I know that being kept in the dark sometimes, not for Flashpoint, but for like an online. For a tournament, I won't say. I know that there was like this was like not even recent or anything like that either. It's just like a while ago. I know that some of the other talent at the same event were getting paid 4 times the amount other talent were getting paid, and that's what happens when you don't have transparency. And I don't think anyone was 4 times better than anybody else at this small thing. So like I think it just stands to benefit people. in the long
I
run.
will say, by the way, just as an aside, and because it's a perfect way to end the tone of a Flashpoint broadcast, I will say I only in general am in favor of that because one, it doesn't actually directly affect me, and two, it actually benefits Flashpoint in general because the entire premise of Flashpoint is it costs so much money to run Counter-Strike that we're going to show that this is the only one where, because eventually you'll make more money from it, we can afford to spend the money here. So it's already in our good graces to do this approach anyway. I will say, though, that's one of those areas where people basically take, like, they love to do this thing where they pick, what they do is it's like victim oppressor thinking. They go, oh, but look at the poor worker. He doesn't know how much he's got. Yeah, that's life. Like, welcome to being an adult. Like, when I own a shop, right, should I be legally obliged to tell you when you come in the shop, by the way, the guy down the street sells it for cheaper than I do? No, it'd be a ridiculous premise. Like, part of the skill of being a person who runs the shop is I price it based on what I think. I market it in a certain way that makes a worse product sell. As a person who's going and shopping, the same thrill you get from getting a deal means that elsewhere you didn't get a deal. So I think just part of being an adult is you got to figure out the fucking scene. And you know what? Part of the game of life is social. It's knowing what you're worth. It's knowing what other people are thinking. It's figuring out how to do it. So it's all well and good going like, oh, but no, shouldn't everyone get paid more? It's like should is like the most fucking cancer word in this world. You should.
You do have to take responsibility at a certain point.
Yeah,
in time.
come
I
on.
totally agree. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us for this week's Flashpoint Q&A. Hopefully by next week we will have a lot more to talk about in terms of schedule, timing, location that Maui leaked, teams that are going to be involved. Hopefully we'll have a bunch of all that stuff for you guys, and we can have
Could
a
I
nice
plug one
question
thing?
about what do you want to plug?
Okay, I want to plug that I'm starting up a podcast that's about the nitty gritty, the
Maui
details.
leaks.
No, yeah, about it's gonna be it's server time. So if you guys saw Mix on this Flashpoint Q&A before, he's gonna be on it. An HLTV writer, Note, is gonna be on it as well. And it's gonna be, if you really want to hear about what's happening in the games, that's the pod for you. So it's gonna be on my channel, and the first episode's gonna come out later today.
Cool. Have fun. Go over there. Watch Maui's show. All right. Bye. See you later.